Today I'm going to help our host to interview some of our audience here at the IFO fan meeting. And the big questions of today will be immersion. Is immersion the only way to get better at speaking?
I think for most people, the definition of immersion, probably you'll be thinking of flying to another country and surrounding yourself with people who speak the language. But I think it's not necessarily that. It can also mean you find yourself in situations where the language, the target language, the language you're learning is the only language you're communicating within that environment. So for example, there are some schools where you're going to be learning math in English and literature in English and other subjects in English so that you can get a grasp of that language. And in that class you will speak no Vietnamese. So that would be an example of immersion. I think when we talk about watching movies and stuff, that's not really it, you know, because you can still be, you know, in your daily life and you can be watching with subtitles, for example. So it's not really immersion. So the question is that technique, that pressing yourself into an environment where you solely use the target language, is it the best way to, or the only way to be better at speaking? So yeah, just to frame it a little bit.
So for me, immersion basically means bathing in it, bathing in the language. Like you create as many chances as possible to like get exposed to the language.
I am 100% in agreement with this statement actually, is because I feel like it works for me. I am actually a really good case study for how far immersion can take you. So it's no secret that I actually spent 1 year in Australia, and that was a very intense period of immersion itself. But I think immersion to me, like Pinkham said, doesn't have to be as intense as throwing yourself into a foreign country without any other skills to defend yourself and surviving only on your usage of the language. Immersion can also be incorporating English, putting English into your daily lives, listening to music, listening to English music, watching English films, maybe starting with subtitles. That is also a form of immersion. I feel like being able to be exposed to language is already a form of immersion, as long as it's intentional and it's over a long period of time. So I genuinely believe when we're talking about language, there's always going to be a difference between native speakers and non-native speakers, which is not a bad thing. I think non-native speakers have a very interesting way to perceive language, but there's always going to be that gap. And when we're learning language, we're trying to get as close as possible to the native language, right? And the only way to close that gap is to be able to receive information from native speakers or the native source.
So in order to get better at speaking, you have to actually speak. So immersing yourself in English is not the only way for you to get better at speaking. You do whatever you want with English, but you have to actually open your mouth and speak. That's the only way for me to get better at speaking. You can immerse yourself, like you can go and live in Australia or America, but say you're going to work in the Chinese speaking community and you live within the Vietnamese speaking community and you never actually speak English, actively speak English. Are you going to get better at speaking?
I understand the point Kim is trying to make. It's about scale. So you can't really be dependent on society or the community that you're in as a whole to be to have that sense of immersion. Like if you depend on your community to immerse you, then it's dependent. Yeah. But if you immerse yourself, in that language, then that's already immersion, right?
Yeah, that has to be intentional, deliberate. Yeah.
I think, like Nhung said in the beginning, the difference of definition definitely draws our distinction quite a bit.